So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever in the world you're listening to us from. Whether it's freight price increases, shortages in HGV drivers, or challenges staffing warehouses and even stores, supply chain and logistics has never been more topical or talked about than it is right now today. And I think it's fair to say that as a key part of that discussion, transportation is that hot buzz topic at the moment. Over the years, enterprises have begun to migrate their networks and applications from the monolithic sort of IT architecture that you expected maybe in the 80s and 90s through to cloud and more recently microservices in an effort to be able to react and to navigate to fast-paced changing market conditions better. Over the last 2 years, specifically, supply chain resilience, continuity and agility have become common themes in the media around dinner tables, and C-level business leader discussions as well. So one of the key areas of debate and discussion around supply chains is the technology that actually underpins them. But why exactly does supply chain technology architecture matter to transportation and logistics professionals, you might ask? That's a good question. It matters because how a solution such as a TMS is architected impacts how quickly and effectively it can keep pace with not just changing operational needs, but also regulatory requirements too. And it's on that note that we come nicely to today's LinkedIn Live panel discussion with supply chain thought leaders and technology experts from all around the world, including Talking Logistics, Google Cloud, Loadsmart, and also Manhattan Associates. I'm delighted to be joined by such an experienced panel of industry experts today. So rather than undersell the quality of our guests, I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Adrian, let's start with you first. You have 30 seconds to talk about your current role, what experience you bring to today's topic of discussion, and your 30 seconds, no pressure, start now.
So, Adrian Gonzalez, I am the president of Adelante SCM and host of Talking Logistics. I've been an industry analyst now for more than 22 years, keeping a pulse on what's happening in the world of supply chain logistics from a technology side, in particular transportation management systems, as well as what's happening in the world of logistics service providers, global trade, and all the emerging technologies and things that are happening in the industry there. So that's my 30 seconds.
Wow, 31.38. So that's pretty good. There's no pressure next, Paula, but maybe you'd like to take the stage and introduce yourself.
Sure, no pressure at all. So hi, everyone. My name is Paula Natoli, and I'm the head of Supply Chain and Logistics Industry Solutions for Google Cloud within the Americas. I've been with Google Cloud a little over a year now, but I spent my entire career, about 23, 24 years, starting to lose count, within enterprise supply chain software. And a bulk of that focused specifically around product management and actually building out solutions, things that we're talking about today. And now I get the pleasure to work with many customers spanning many industries and across the globe to leverage data and technology to help accelerate supply chain decisions. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Paula. A pretty good job. That's in silver position at the moment. The good news is there's only 4 people, so you only have to beat 1. Right, we're going to start with you now, Tim. Your 30 seconds starts now.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tim Evans. I'm the Vice President of Sales at Loadsmart. Very, very glad to be here. I've been with Loadsmart for going on almost 3 years now, but my background is in technology and helping companies to develop really around data and SaaS solutions. And I think what I bring to the table from an industry perspective is that technology, bringing that into logistics supply chain, that evolution that's going on right now, that mirroring of what's happening in other markets, bringing that to what has been really a long time in coming, right, to the industry around technology and data and integration. So looking forward to the discussion today. So thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Tim. Well, Paula, you've got yourself a medal because Tim's clocked 49 seconds.
All right. Thanks, Tim.
Anything for you.
And last but not least, Rob, take it away.
Sure, I'll try and bring home the gold here. So my name's Rob Schaeffer. I'm the Vice President of TMS Sales and Business Development here at Manhattan Associates. I've been in the enterprise software space for the past 23 years, the last 12 specifically in logistics and TMS. I've seen a considerable amount of change over the last 12 years in logistics. I fully expect that change to continue and to accelerate, and I'm looking forward to this dialogue today to talk about how the modern TMS can help manage that change. Jim? James?
Nailed it.
There you go.
27 seconds. It's almost like you've been practicing, Rob.
I just made all that up.
Thank you, everybody, for those great introductions. Far better than I could have done for any of you. For those of you watching this live today, we would love to hear your thoughts and questions on any of today's discussion. Please send those along to our panelists in the drop-down box below, and we will all do our best to respond, as the conversation evolves. So, question number one. Before we get into the real nitty-gritty details, I think it's important for us to sort of set the scene a little bit and to understand why the need for modern TMS is so important today. So, Adrian, with your Adelante research hat, maybe you'd like to kick us off.
Sure, and you touch upon some of the things in your opening comments there, James. I mean, I think if you pick up any newspaper today, any trade journal today, the answer's right there. I think the last I checked, I think there's over 60 ships that are anchored off the California ports ready to be unloaded, right? So that's one dimension of transportation that, is challenging, many shippers out there. You look at the trucking market, and shippers are facing a very constrained environment. And that results in, trying to find a truck to move their load, obviously, but also when you look at what's happening on the cost side with increases, sharp increases in both contract rates as well as spot rates, and that's the prediction moving forward into 2022, is that those rates are going to continue to move up until you get some easement in the capacity, situation. And then this is really happening across all modes. I mean, if you look at even something like parcel, we're coming up into Q4 right now, which historically has been quote unquote peak season. But in reality, we've been in peak season, for 18 months now in the parcel environment. So that's challenging there. So the bottom line is that, managing cost and capacity, in the current transportation market across all modes is more, challenging than ever, for shippers. And in fact, in a survey we did with our supply chain research community in Dago, we asked them, what's your characterization of the current market? And 2/3 of supply chain executives in our communities characterize the current truck market in the United States as very or extremely challenging. So I think that just gives you the picture of what's happening. At the other end, though, customer expectations are more challenging than ever, right? So despite everything that's happening right now in the market, you and I as consumers in the B2C world are still expecting free and fast delivery. And in the B2B world, it's the same thing. You've got on time and full, and certainly many of the B2B customers are still expecting that service component to hold, despite everything else that's happening out there. So at the end of the day, TMS really has become a must-have application, right, to meet the service and cost requirements and expectations of your customers, as well as to navigate through all of these, disruptions and things that are happening in the marketplace right now, and to do so in the most, cost-effective, efficient, and scalable way. So, at the end of the day, we've talked for a long time about how you can't manage transportation anymore with spreadsheets and manual processes. Well, that's certainly truer than ever, today.
That's a great way to frame today's discussion, Adrian. Tim, Paula, anything to add to that from your perspectives?
Yeah, so I think that where the TMS has changed, right, is that it's evolved in to meet the needs of the changing conditions. In the past, TMSs were very closed, right? It was something that shippers relied on as a tool, and now, given the change in the marketplace, right, and the complexity of it, the need, it's become much more open, right? So that that data flow comes into it. So I think that's sort of a definition of what the modern TMS is, at least from my perspective, is that it's much more open than it was before to be able to input that complexity and be able to be dynamic, right? To change within the current market conditions, where before it was a tool that enterprise would use to manage their business and their transportation needs. It has really evolved, right, to this more open platform and that's able to respond to the current market conditions.
Excellent. And what do you think about this, Paula? I mean, before your role in Google Cloud, you worked for a supply chain company who we shall not name, but you've got plenty of experience of this yourself. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, we're at a pivot point here, right? We have all of the industry forces coming at us. We have the technology forces coming at us. We have the company and consumer expectations and those forces coming at us. Right now, we're at that perfect pivot point. And when we look at the TMS in the middle of that, helping to execute and make it all happen, again, we're at that pivot point. And the modernized TMS is going to be a critical underpinning.
Excellent. Yeah. So that's framed the conversation nicely today, I think. So let's move on to the next point. Now, this is the nitty gritty, which we talked about. We've heard the terms cloud native and microservices used a lot in the last 5 years. Certainly cloud has been on the agenda for well over a decade now, but microservices increasingly over the last sort of 3 to 4 years when you talk about Docker and so on, containerization and so on and so forth. But what do each of these terms actually mean to supply chains? And why are they so important to a modern TMS today? So we're going to go back to you here, Paula, with your Google hat on. So maybe you can kick us off here.
Absolutely. You know, it's funny when you look at this, we all hear these terms. We hear microservices, we hear cloud native. James just mentioned containerization. But if you take a step back and look at it more from the business perspective, what does the business actually need? And why does sometimes the business professionals discount those terms because they're too technical in nature, right? But if you take a step back and say, well, what does the business need given everything that we just identified here in the beginning? Businesses need to be agile, right? So an underpinning technology must also be agile in order to support what the business actually needs, right? So take the e-commerce shift that we had over the past 18 months. Those retailers who had agile systems were able to more adeptly change all of their configuration to move likely from a complete brick and mortar perspective into a completely online perspective, right? And those companies were able to take advantage of the changing in how everything was going to operate. Okay? So same thing holds true with TMSs. And systems built on that technology are going to provide companies with the best ability to actually adapt. So James, I'd say here think of it from the business perspective. If a business professional were to change the terms of cloud native and microservices and just replace them with words like agile and connected, does a company need that? Does the business need that? Absolutely, they do.
Quite right. And Rob, you've been very quiet, but I know you can't wait to have your input here. Give us some perspective from the supply chain experts.
Sure. Well, James, you didn't call on me, so that's why I was quiet. But anyway, yeah. So the whole platform, like the connectivity part that Paula was just talking about, right, and that Tim had mentioned earlier. The TMS system can no longer just be self-contained, right? It needs to be connected to the larger supply chain ecosystem, right? To be able to have access to additional capacity or visibility or traffic, whatever that happens to be, right? And it's that underlying platform that allows for that connectivity to happen in a very easy and quick fashion versus trying to rewrite a legacy or monolithic TMS system that chances are is only going to break once you start to touch that code. So it's the modern platform that allows for all of that connectivity and visibility, which allows then the business to be agile.
Great. Yeah, that's a super example, super explanation, I should say. Now, Adrian, from an analyst perspective, you must have heard a number of different organizations describe these different terms in different ways. What, bearing that all in mind, what do you feel that cloud native and microservices mean in terms of the TMS perspective today?
Yeah, I think I'll just echo what Paula mentioned. I think when it depends on who you're talking to, right? So I talk to a lot of, let's say, transportation executives, right? So people that are VPs, directors, managers of transportation management. And for them, when you use the terms microservices or cloud, that tends to be a little bit IT centric, right? So you have to put it into terms that they understand. And when I talk to them about it, I say, well, why does this matter to you? Architecture. When you talk about architecture of a technology solution, well, it matters because it really impacts how quickly and effectively you can keep pace with the changing needs and requirements of your transportation operations. I mean, we've talked about how the current transportation environment has changed so quickly. So if you've got a very inflexible and old architecture that really can't quickly adjust and enable new capabilities, new services, and so forth, you're going to be at a disadvantage. And when you think about the old days, right, where it would take upgrades were a very painful process, right? You can't afford to wait a year or more to upgrade to a new solution and to get new capabilities or to be able to enable new services. So that's why architecture matters there as well. I mean, you want the ability from a cloud standpoint, from an architecture standpoint, to be quote unquote versionless, right? Where you're getting continuous updates, throughout. And Paula mentioned this as well. I mean, scalability matters here too. I mean, certainly the pandemic for a lot of companies slowed down their operations, but for a lot of other companies, it actually, they saw an exponential growth in business, right? And so they had to quickly adapt to that, and their enterprise systems, and in this case, transportation management systems, had to quickly adapt to that huge surge in demand and capabilities. So I think that's where, ultimately it matters, for the executives. It's that it's going to enable you to be able to respond quickly and effectively to whatever changes, come down the road.
And maybe Tim, any thoughts from your perspective from the front line?
Just, I think echoing it, really like what Paula said about, and I think might steal this in terms of agility and connectivity, just replacing those terms, cloud native, obviously moving to the cloud, and that opens up all kinds of possibilities. But, you think about from an automation perspective, really, that's what people are looking for, right? To be able to achieve that efficiency, and that automation is possible through data, right? And so, how do we pull that in, and how do we work with that? It's really what the cloud allows us to do. And so, the ability to move faster and be connected. With that platform in the cloud, that movement to that direction is what the modern TMS is allowing you to do today. So
Great points. Great points, everybody there. So let's pivot a little bit. And we talked about this a little, we touched on this earlier, with the growing capacity crunch and driver shortages. Tim, your point, the need for greater visibility in terms of data, but also not just data, the movement of goods within supply chains. The role of technology partnerships has changed. How does a modern TMS accommodate this new paradigm that we're seeing today?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, right, I touched on this before. Is it's really about changing to be an open platform, right? Technology has enabled the entire supply chain to become fully integrated, and the modern TMS is designed to connect to those technologies in a way that previously was not possible. So it's really become a robust tool for shippers to run their business in ways that they've never done before. To be able to pull in those different partnerships and different data feeds to be able to do that. Now, within that, you need to have that automation, but you also need to have control. And technology partners are creating solutions that allow shippers to work in ways, like I said, that previously they were not able to do. But you need to be able to provide controls, right? Still, that uniqueness of your business and being able to fit that in so that you're able to use the TMS to manage your business as you want, but be able to have control, right? To tailor that to it. We talked about the data, that data intelligence, right? That's what that opening allows you to do, to be able to look at the data and be able to make sense of it, to be able to run your business in ways, like I said, that otherwise you wouldn't be able to do. And really the modern TMS is that centralized tool. It's really the landing place for it. And so it's really a shift, I think, in terms of what is possible. And it's able to provide that analysis, that business insights, to provide that actionable intelligence that everyone's looking for.
Absolutely, yeah, good points there. And seeing as we're talking about partners, well, let's switch over to you, Paula. Google Cloud Manhattan. We saw the blog a couple of weeks ago. We're all doing good things together, so I'll hand it over to you to talk a little bit about this.
Sure. Well, a couple of things I'll mention here, just also putting a tangent on what Tim was pointing out, is connectivity becomes absolutely critical, right? And the TMS is a critical cog in a large supply chain system ecosystem. So when you look at it in terms of the ability to connect, we can talk about connectivity across trading partners, et cetera. But we can also talk about it in terms of connectivity across those vital systems that need to be able to orchestrate end-to-end workflows, upstream into the planning side, downstream into the execution, into parcel, et cetera. So the connectivity aspect of it all plays a vital role. And so, James, as you point out, between Google Cloud and Manhattan Associates, that connectiveness that's going to help tie it together to orchestrate workflows end to end becomes critical. So it's an exciting time to see data and technology help to underpin and help to advance supply chain systems, including the TMS.
Absolutely, and I suppose from my perspective, looking at it slightly more two-dimensionally, but two heads are better than one, aren't they? So it's a win-win. Or many more heads are better than a few. So, Rob, given the fact that Paul has just touched on the importance of partnerships, the Manhattan and the Google Cloud perspective, do you want to give us a little bit of the Manhattan side of the conversation and how we view partnerships as part of this new TMS paradigm?
Absolutely. I mean, partnerships are critical, right? Whether it be kind of on the technology side with Google Cloud, whether it be on the digital freight broker side with a Loadsmart or any of the visibility players, whatever. I mean, we've all talked thus far that it's all about openness in TMS, right? And being able to bring as much data into the TMS as possible, and all of those partnerships and technology partnerships are critical. And Google's at the forefront of that in terms of hosting our environments and allowing for a lot of the scalability and elasticity and all the things that we can accomplish with our platform.
Super. And then I want to give you a chance to talk here, Adrian, because obviously all the new partnerships and all the ways that companies maybe hadn't thought they needed to or should be working with each other. You threw a hand grenade in there 24 months ago, and all sorts of amazing things have come out of that. So from your industry analyst perspective, give us some of your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, just to underscore some of the points that have already been made. I mean, TMS is just, transportation management systems do not exist in a vacuum, right? So, on the one hand, they really are the almost the equivalent or create the platform that you would think of almost from a networking perspective, right? Because you have to connect to a lot of external trading partners, your carriers, other 3PLs, and other outside entities. So the need to exchange data and information and collaborate with external trading partners, I mean, that all has to happen via the TMS. And so that external connectivity is critically important. And that's where the cloud comes in and web services come in. And again, where the architecture comes in. Equally important is the need to connect and interface with other enterprise systems, whether those are internal to your organization, whether it's an ERP or a warehouse management system, or they're external, right? With what I call on the edge of TMS applications, which is real-time freight visibility or digital freight marketplaces or things like that. So really, it has become. I think it was mentioned earlier, right? It's so much more than just an inside the four walls type of an application, right? It truly is a platform for not only internal communication collaboration, but also external communication in collaboration. So in fact, when we've done research with our Indago research community, and we've asked them about important factors to consider when evaluating, TMS solutions, and one of the things that came up on top was integration, right? How does it integrate not only with my other enterprise systems, but with external, trading partners? Because that is a critical success factor, for many companies. And again, when you talk about integration today, it's very different than 22 years ago when I first started in the industry, right? Now you're talking about API, application program interfaces, and web services are really the dominant, and preferred way to, interface with other solutions out there, and to truly try to create that, kind of seamless, environment, and that's really where the industry is moving, moving toward.
Yeah, good points. I think if you had used the acronym API 22 years ago, you probably would have come back with a bunch of military gear. So it does show you how times have changed, and so rapidly as well. And finally, this is the last question which I want to pose to you all today. And we could probably actually spend an entire 40, 50 minutes talking about this. So who knows, maybe later in the year we will come back and do just that. But we'll start with you first, Rob. How do you anticipate the TMS space changing over the next 5 years? And what would you advise organizations to keep an eye on in terms of hot button areas for the future?
Well, the only thing that's really, really certain, James, for the future is change itself, right? We've seen quite a bit over the past 18 months, right? I believe the pace of that change is even going to accelerate, right? But I don't have a crystal ball in terms of what exactly is going to happen over the next 5 years. I wish I did, right? But I can certainly surmise that we're going to continue to have issues with capacity, both in labor and both in equipment that shippers are going to have to deal with. We may see some additional, legislative moves in terms of sustainability or environmental regulation. We see more, or it certainly seems more through the news that we see more natural disasters happening, right, that affect supply chains, in the form of hurricanes or volcanoes affecting air traffic, earthquakes, and obviously the continued pandemic, right? And then there's also going to be change that's driven by innovation. Right, so whether that be the increased use of drones, self-driving trucks, more robotics in the marketplace, or even just the expansion of the gig economy, right? I mean, the bottom line is there's change, it's coming, it's the unforeseen change that is probably the biggest issue, right? And so, all of that change and the innovation that's going to be built to address that change is going to force the shippers to be agile. Right, and that's where the modern TMS system comes in, right? And what Manhattan provides in a modern TMS, we've heard the buzzwords, microservices based, cloud native, but really what we're providing to the market is a versionless, extensible platform, right? That we all have already stated goes beyond the four walls. So versionless in that the latest innovation is always at the shipper's fingertips to take advantage of, right? But it goes beyond that. We want the shipper to be able to take advantage of the innovation of their partners in the marketplace, right? So that we can bring their innovation in as well. And then we bring it into what we would call a unified logistics control center, right? Which is not just a place to view your network and to understand what's going on in your network, to be able to take advantage and action against all of that innovation that's being pulled in through the platform. Right, so we want people to be able to react to changes in their network, not only using our innovation but their partners' innovation, right, and to stay on the forefront of that change and to be able to react very quickly, right. And we believe you can only do that with a modern platform, right. And I think it's really important to note, when you're talking cloud native and microservices based, that folks really do their due diligence and make sure you're comparing apples to apples, right? Because oftentimes, the terms cloud native, people say, yes, my application is cloud, right? Well, a lot of times it's just a monolithic application that is hosted somewhere, right? And that doesn't provide the flexibility and the agility that a modern TMS platform does. So, that's how, as I said, I don't know what all the changes is coming. I can tell you, though, that we've built a platform that we believe is best suited to meet the challenges in the market, and we look forward to doing so.
Great. Thank you, Rob. And Paula, Google Cloud is well known for being able to predict these types of things and take a step into the future before we get there. So, what are your thoughts on this particular topic?
Well, if anything has become very clear to all of us in the supply chain space over the past 18 months, and frankly, those not in the supply chain space, is that disruptions are going to remain, right? Whatever we think about, and we hear the term, oh, post-COVID, and frankly, I don't think there's necessarily this, clear line delineation of pre-COVID, COVID, post-COVID, right? Everything has morphed, and it's actually, fundamentally that new normal. So it does go back down to the underpinning of how agile can a company be, and in terms, how agile can the underlying systems be to enable and push those systems and processes forward as we migrate and navigate what is this new normal.
Excellent. Yeah, I like that. It drives me crazy on a daily basis when I look on social media and I see people going pre-post COVID and you're like, the new normal. I hate the new normal. It's just normal now. So very, very good points. Tim, what are your folks at Loadsmart saying about the next 5 years? Give some crystal ball insight.
Yeah. So I think for one thing that we see, and I think that it's certainly over the last 18 months has become evident to everyone is that transportation, logistics, supply chain has been pushed to the forefront, right? In the past, it's been something that has operated sort of as a cost center in the background, and I think that will remain. I think that the criticality of it is now more evident than ever before, as it always was, but I think it's now been pushed forward. So I think that looking at logistics and supply chain and the transportation and how the TMS fits into that is central. And I think that companies over the next 5 years will look to that as ways to fulfill some of their larger goals, like sustainability. I think that'll become much more important. I think it'll be more part of the dialogue in terms of what companies are looking for. And I think that they'll look at technologies to help them accomplish that. That's part of what we work with Manhattan on, is how do we fit into that to be a data feed so that people can make better decisions, quicker decisions, faster decisions to reach their broader goals. That's what so I think that what has started will continue, but I think that it'll have a bigger impact as they look at larger goals, like sustainability. Yeah, and maybe that's hopeful. That becomes much more important as companies look at that as ways to not just have a nice press release, but actually increase their bottom line by being better. Better at what they do and achieving some of those sustainability goals. So.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Tim. Not just having it as a tick box exercise and a press release once a year, but actually living and breathing it. And I think you're quite right that supply chain has a big part to play within that wider context of sustainable development and climate change. So let's hope that the next 5 years is really positive. Yeah. And that the industry can do maybe a little bit more than the world has done, or the governments of the world have done over the last 5 years. And Adrian, take it away. Give us your insight for the next 5 years. I promise I won't hold it against you.
Yes, no. Well, the challenge of going last is that all the key things have already been said. So I concur with all the other panelists here with some of the things that they talked about. Certainly, maybe a TMS in 5 years not only will be looking to optimize and route trucks and airplanes and ships and so forth, but also incorporating drones and delivery robots and autonomous vehicles as has been talked about before. So I think just the scope of what TMSs are going to be optimizing and planning and executing on, you're going to have these quote unquote new modes that companies are going to be incorporating as part of that. I think obviously machine learning, AI, those technologies are going to continue to play a bigger and bigger part of transportation management systems. And I think the third area that I don't think gets much attention, but I think it's very important, is the user experience and the user interface, and the fact that this is still a people business, right? So it wouldn't surprise me, and we're already seeing some beginning stages here, that we will interface with transportation management systems like we interface with Alexa and the Google the Google Smart devices, right? Where we will actually speak to them, or speak to our TMS, right? So what's the status of this load? What's the status of this shipment? Can you reroute? And again, leveraging some of these newer technologies, the user interfaces is not about clicks anymore. It's about voice commands. So I think we might see that in the next, 5 years. And certainly, the ability to communicate on a person to person basis, just like we do on social media, right? With LinkedIn and Facebook, where we can send messages and do these video chats with one another on a personal side of things, incorporating these types of communication folks between a shipper and a carrier to be able to interface via the TMS, not only by sending an email, but by doing, within the TMS environment, be able to message each other, video chat with each other, all of that getting recorded and logged. So I think that's another area that I think is exciting to me, is really rethinking or reimagining the user interface to promote, smarter, more efficient, more scalable ways of communicating, collaborating, not only from an application to application standpoint, but a person to person standpoint.
Absolutely. Communication is one of the most important things that we have, isn't it? Regardless of the industry. And I'm going to hold you to that voice piece, because I think you're onto something there. I already talked to Alexa and order things off there, so it's just the next step forward, isn't it? So I think you could be onto something really hot there. So based on today's discussion, I think it's pretty clear to conclude that cloud native microservice IT architecture offers a multitude of benefits to organizations when it comes to transportation management, not least how these solutions can keep up with constantly moving consumer expectations, trends, and external headwinds, such as a global pandemic. Rob, maybe you'd like to just summarize your key takeaway for everybody watching today. And I won't hold you to 30 seconds here, so off you go.
Okay. So we heard a lot while we were here, right? Pretty much a common theme, though, in terms of there's been a lot of change in the past. There's going to be a lot of change in the future, and shippers absolutely need to be able to adapt and have the agility to be able to adapt to that change, right? And in the TMS space, the best way to do that is with a modern TMS system that leverages modern technology like microservices, that is cloud native, and it's open, right? That allows you to connect to the larger supply chain ecosystem, to be able to bring the innovation into the system from those partners, right? And to be able to act upon that innovation, right? And to be able to solve today's problems, tomorrow's problems, and to be open enough to accept, future technologies in the future that Adrian was just talking about, right? So to have that platform that you can build upon for the future is critical. And if you don't have that, you're going to find yourself left behind because it's going to be very, very difficult to add that new innovation to the monolithic systems that exist today.
Good points, strong points there. Paula, what would you like to say to those watching today?
Yeah, I want to touch a little bit in closing here to some of the things that were mentioned before. And Adrian mentioned drones, right? Or autonomous vehicles, et cetera. What it all comes down to, the fact is that things need to be connected. We talk about connected devices all the time and IoT. We need the same aspect in all of our systems to be able to drive a level of supply chain excellence and agility. Even today, think about it. Anybody can become a logistics provider. Right? You have your own truck, your own van, heck, you have your own bike. You're now a logistics provider. So how do we ensure that our systems are going to be able to easily adapt to the growing logistics and supply chain ecosystem? So I'd hone in on the connected piece as being a critical underpinning.
Love it. I'm going to get my bike out. I'm going to add that to my LinkedIn profile. I'm a logistics provider. And maybe something from you, Tim. Any final thoughts for us today?
Yeah, technology is being developed and applied to how shippers manage the movement of the goods. Given the complexity of logistics, it's taken a long while for the technology pieces to fall into place. And the benefit of any technology is providing that efficiency that we talked about, the better insights, the cost reduction. And that's possible through automation, as Paula said, the connectivity, the connectiveness, which is enabled by data. And the essential glue that brings that all together is the modern TMS, which is why we're really happy to be working with Manhattan. Really good partnership there. And so I think that that's really what it's about, right? You know, we've sort of said it over again, but that it's finally here. The technology pieces are in place for us to take advantage of it and make it a reality. So
Great, thank you. And last but by no means least, Adrian, leave us with your final thought for today.
I mean, just again, I've been an industry analyst now for over 22 years, and if you look at what I would call the DNA of transportation management systems, I mean, they've certainly evolved significantly, over that time frame, and in response to both, advances in technology, like everything we've talked about today, cloud, web services, connectivity, and the like. As well as the changing needs of shippers and carriers and the market as a whole, right? So the TMS systems are very different today than they were 20 years ago. And in fact, if you've got a TMS that was built in the 1980s, you would not survive today. And if you were even one that was built in the 90s or even early 2000s would not survive today, just because things have changed so much, again, on the technology front as well as the market and environment front. So, in order to keep pace with everything that's happening, today, you really need, a modern TMS, as we've been talking about, and the building blocks of that modern TMS is, the web services, the cloud native, versionless, everything that we've talked about, today, and those are some of the key things that companies need to be thinking about as they're evaluating transportation management systems, whether they are have one that's kind of outdated, or they're looking at a TMS for the first time and trying to understand what the state of the market is and where it's heading, and how it aligns with their needs and expectations.
Super. Well, thank you very much. So there you have it. If you haven't considered the benefits of a modern transportation management system, or indeed your wider supply chain, maybe today's discussion will have convinced you enough to at least maybe explore these things a little bit more. If any of the topics or talking points that we've discussed today have pricked your interest, please do reach out to any of our guests via social media or get in touch with one of your friendly team members at Manhattan Associates. Until next time, it's goodbye from our guests, Paula, Tim, Adrian, and Rob. And finally, it's goodbye from me. Stay safe, everybody, and we will see you again soon on LinkedIn. And who knows, maybe even in person before too long. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.